of the Lord Christ Jesus. Gratitude for the blessing this day. Further guided to a state of repentance in full, to be emptied of improper identification with this dead flesh, this world of death and game of lies, to remain properly identified with what I am, which is the most super intelligent power and force of love and creation at the highest levels of vibrational frequency, a quickening spirit, rising above. And in administration, within delusion of the Lord Christ Jesus' victory over death, antithesis, Satan at Calvary, the cross, executed for sedition by the state of an enemy, this system of things that makes an enemy of what I am, having executed the Lord Christ Jesus at the cross. Christ traveling the entombed, traveling the underworld, resurrected from the dead, a symbolic victory, symbolizing victory over death in this world of death and game of lies. Seen publicly, mission complete, and then a rocket blasting off into the heavens. Thank you, Lord, thank you. Heal me, Lord Jesus, heal me. Thank you for the healing. That which has been received, that which? The healing that has been received, as well as the act of healing in this moment. And it is great indeed. Thank you. In the name of the Lord Christ Jesus. Amen. The most super intelligent power and force of love and creation is my shepherd. There can be no want. It maketh me to lie down in green pastures. What I am leadeth me beside the still waters. What I am restoreth my soul, and leadeth me in the paths of righteousness, for its name's sake. Yea, though Benton, in the context of the performance, walks through the valley of the shadow of death, what Benton is, at his core spiritual essence, can fear no evil or anything else. Because everywhere he goes, his nature, which is proposition or thesis, goes with him. Death is merely antithesis in this delusory realm. So, of course, a table is prepared before me in the presence of this realm that makes an enemy of what I am. Of course, Benton's head is anointed with oil. Of course, Benton's head cup runneth over. Goodness and mercy follow Benton all the days of his life. For spiritually beyond this delusory realm, Benton dwells in the house of the most super intelligent power and force of love and creation possible, always. And it can be no other way. What's happening? Benton here. Eventually, old Benton will get around to rewriting Psalm 23. It's the only Old Testament writings that I've found any use for, and even that, as written, is less and less helpful. And having skin in the game, if the Christians, the people of the book, want to attempt to impose structure and form via dead religion, dead dogma, and dead doctrine, all of these things that trace their origins to this world of death and game of lies, well, that's fine. For the spirit will quicken, vibrate more quickly, as is its nature, and will therefore not be subject to the attacks of religion, structure, dogma, and doctrine. Traps, prisons, and this is where we get to discipline of the mind. The system of things responsible for the psychology of the individual after being sacrificed to Moloch's machine, industrial and post-industrial society here in the performance within this vacuous, delusory, adversarial realm of business transactions. Ever ask yourself, why does everything have to be based on business transactions and business and money? Why? Is that the only way? Because that's what was happening when I entered into this realm within the context of delusion, and that's the only possibility of experiencing, if that's even the correct term, time, space, location, place, because all of this was seemingly happening. It's valid. Well, in that case, if nobody had a concept of horrific nightmare torture, and then there was an ongoing process of horrific nightmare torture somewhere, and if a person happened upon that and entered into an environment of tortures, would that then validate the torture and the evil and the horrific acts being perpetrated? But why? Because they were already happening when the individual entered into the environment. So yeah, it must be appropriate, right? Because it was happening. Because if it wasn't appropriate, it would not be happening. I mean, that's the conventional wisdom. That's where so-called common sense gets us. And just identify an outgroup. Oh, well, yeah, but we can point at Democrats and ridicule them and laugh at them, Biden's poopy diapers. So I guess, this systematic torture is completely fine because it's already happening, and there's something to point at and ridicule and say, well, it's because of them. And logic would dictate, okay, remove them and what is left? Does the torture and the strife and the struggle and the pain leave with them? Do the social problems leave with the Democrats in that example? The ruthless application of context, the discipline of the mind. And meditation, in part, is to observe that the being within their own mind has drifted away from their own vigilance and discipline of always insisting on a proper application of context, and has temporarily allowed themselves to be pulled off into the deep waters of the deep, muddy waters of no context. And in fact, adversary obsessively seeks the muddying of the waters while doing almost everything, even to ridiculous extremes, to avoid accepting a context or to avoid assertion of context. And we see that on this channel with certain folks who seem to enjoy attempting to spiritually attack old Benton. Right? And they're serving their master: death, lies, deception. And then the Eastern Buddhist, perhaps Hindu notion of being grateful for one's enemies. Well, yeah, within a context, sure. But of what use is that sentiment? Is gratitude a sentiment? People talk about an attitude of gratitude. Well, are we on to sentimentality? And how far removed is that from whimsy? And now is the being into feeling and emotion, which are by their very nature irrational. And so we can see how quickly even the focus centered within themselves individual can be dragged off into various traps of the psyche and the emotional systems, therefore necessitating, in Benton's view, a mastery of such, especially the emotional system, as we see the populace becoming ever more so-called autistic, which in some way is a hobbling of the ability to understand, comprehend, and work through emotion. Even as Benton's healing accelerates further, and a great healing occurred towards the end of yesterday's stream, which certainly was one of the less popular streams, and I get it, I understand, and that's okay. This ain't for everybody, and again, pat yourselves on the back for being on the vanguard of one of the few places on the internet where thinking and ideas and various practices and all of these things are pushed forward and not allowed to stagnate. See? And really there is no stagnation. You know, it's to go backwards. Right. Well, why would Benton come to this place, you know, in very, you know, a Russian nesting dolls of context, that if I attempt to go through all of the context right now, the main thread of the narrative will be lost. On the verge of that now, actually. But observing so many individuals in the so-called truth community panelverse seeming to stagnate. And again, from Benton's perspective, what's the point of going through the tortures? And see, going through even implies a progression. And uncovering the perfected path within, even before Benton understood that that was what was happening within himself, spiritually and mentally and physically, physiological, and I definitely want to get into some physiology. I've made some notes here. Physiology. Benton identified many years ago that his path is progress. Right. Well, then what's the purpose? Well, to be of service. Well, that's non-specific. To what? You know, to whom or what, on what basis? Now we're back to, now the royal we, for the purposes of the discussion, rejoins context, 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 location, location, location. For it is the up to the being's creative process that never lies dormant, and the vigilant disciplining of the mind to ruthlessly apply context in a world of death and game of lies that use as currency and seek to always muddy the waters, which is to not speak specifically in a context. So then checking in on various channels from time to time, and I've been keeping my finger on the pulse from time to time of a channel, Modern Men Lost Again, and at times another YouTube channel, Proper Instruction Motivates People, at Pimp Unslaved. And if folks are unaware, it's possible to go into the YouTube search box and type in the username of a channel, at Pimp Unslaved, my channel at bentonja668. Because if you just type in Benton channel, it may or may not come up. May or may not. And the content creator or host, Landry, and I've heard him mention this several times in reference to Paul Unslaved, the proprietor of the Proper Instruction Motivates People channel. That in the so-called truth community, this powerful personality of Paul Unslaved, you know, seems to bring discussions to a concept of truth non-contextually, perhaps within an implied or assumed context, without overtly stating what he means by truth, which has multiple definitions. And even those multiple definitions would, the seemingly innumerable contexts in which they could be applied. And if the person will not, cannot, or does not speak as specifically as possible, what does that say with respect to the potential motivations, manipulative nature? And none of this is accusation. The intentions, or perhaps lack of discipline, and why. And then what is the purpose? For what reason? What is the motivation? Is it attention seeking? Which is not wholly inappropriate. Certainly, Benton has accepted his own attention seeking nature many years ago. Been knowing that for most of my adult life, certainly. And I suspect everyone with a psychology formed within this realm, has their own various form of attention seeking, and again, negative attention is still attention. Negative attention is still attention. See, you can get into parasocial dynamics, codependent dynamics, the so-called narcissist/empath, all of these things. And the psychological illness of this vacuous, delusory, adversarial realm of business transactions. And then, lest we forget, the ever-present waking dream, surrealistic unreality, deja vu all over again. Speaking of that, such as when walking back from the restroom after the morning constitutional, a migrant was near the pull-up bar, and early in the morning, of course, here on the West Coast. And I believe I've ran into this same fellow from time to time, hanging out, enjoying his music, doing his workout. Probably an intelligent fellow, because he seems to be, in the process of learning English. And he had a karaoke machine, presumably. I couldn't see it, but I heard it. And the song was, "I Miss the Rains Down in Africa." Now, is that R-A-I-N-S or R-E-I-G-N-S? Of course, all three of those phonetically, exact words, different meanings in different contexts, right? And the words themselves have different meanings, noun forms, verb forms, and even multiple meanings within the various forms. And Benton temporarily was mistaken as to what band had done the song. He was thinking Asia, the supergroup. And of course, Benton, seeking to connect, especially something from pop culture, to connect it to himself. Oh, again, now here's the attention seeking. Reminded himself that his first ever 45 single record that he saved his allowance for and purchased as a young child in 1982 or maybe 1983, misremembering the band, but it actually was Toto's Heat of the Moment. Right. And then another song from 1985 or 1986 that Benton really liked as a child, Asia's Kyrie, K-Y-R-I-E, but not Kyrie. That's more of the urban basketball player. Kyrie Eleison, down the road that I must follow, which I believe the meaning is something to do with spiritual seeking. And this was, some of this stuff seemingly was born out of an idea of Paul Simon world music, so-called, right? Some of these themes. from what I remember anyway. And he was in his, you know, accented broken English attempting to sing along, right, to this I Miss the Rains down in Africa. And not the deja vu so much as just immediately struck by the surrealistic, the waking dream surrealistic unreality. And Benton's on autism, I will say, undiagnosed fake autism is on the wane, and that's probably part of the healing. And my research indicates that, somewhat controversially, a number of so-called autistic people do recover, air quotes, to varying degrees, if that's the proper context in which to address such a thing. Because autism, of course, a collection of behaviors that are all within the normal range for humans, if humanity's a thing, that have all been collected and given a name. And very quickly that brings us, whatever that means, to the context of medical coding and billing. And now, hey, bam, everything's a business. Once again, full circle, as it were. But yes, the high level healing via prayer in some ways, via exorcism, if anybody remembers what was being, if invoked is the proper term, and maybe it's not, near the end of yesterday's stream. Shout out to Jack Skellington for perhaps unwittingly assisting, because Benton, in his own reactions to the live chat, reading the live chat near the end of the broadcast, had a visceral reaction to, again, being reminded of individuals seemingly, but maybe they're not tortured. I don't know. Maybe that's Benton's own projection of being tortured within a world of death and a game of lies. But, presuming that would pretty much everybody struggles and suffers, and then saying, look at this fool, right? But not accusing, just how foolish to come here and have these experiences and not grow and change and evolve and internally bootstrap. But, Benton spent many years normie as fuck, right? And also now I'm seemingly walking the streets. My own ability to spot the normies and normie/NPCs has increased. I ran into a normie/NPC mailman as I was walking. He came down some steps and then nonsensically began walking directly towards me, only to turn as I crossed the street towards him and to go back the way he came. And then I thought, okay, I'm not going to put out because these guys walk all day, man, these mailmen. It's like, am I really going to put the hammer down and blast through here enough to walk fast enough to pass this guy and just stay in front of him? Or what am I going to do? Hang back? Meanwhile, I don't know how long it takes him to drop the mail off in the process. So I crossed to the other side of the street and observed him where he would have been, we would have walked together, right? And what do these normies get out of, what does the NPC get out of being in my vicinity? The vicinity of the real thing, a walker of the perfected path that has been uncovered and lies within. And these normies and NPCs must get something energetically out of it, even if only seeking to perhaps, even to a minute degree, sort of pull me down a rung or two. And remember, humanity does not build up humanity, but humanity absolutely tears humanity down. There is no building up. That's a myth of this place, that humanity comes together and is positive, whatever that means, and builds one another up. Well, you're going to have to show me, Jack, because I don't see it. Now I see what is claimed to result in that through a bunch of lip service and, again, status quo, social contracting, and peer grouping. Yeah, see the claim. It's not detectable. It's dead, right? The idea of society facilitating humanity, building up humanity individually, that's dead. So, what is this dead, hollow, again, vacuous, empty NPC seeking? So, observing, and much like a video game, having crossed the street, free to roam within the environment, the artificial environment, and struck in the moment with the waking dream, surrealistic unreality of this artificial environment. And I don't mean Los Angeles, I mean the entirety of certainly the United States. United States of what? Mental enslavement and psyche, a collective psyche after being sacrificed to Moloch individually, and then that's a mass of individuals, right? The united enslaved psyche of Benetton instead of the united colors of Benetton. If anybody remembers that. Oh, now we're back to the advertising and the business transactions. So I see that we would have walked together perfectly for a distance, and then he was going up some stairs, right? So and my first thought was, okay, well, what was the big deal, Benton? Because you would have walked with him for a short distance and then continued on your merry way. Well, he completely disappeared after that. Because I continued to observe the street, he did not return to the street. Now, maybe, it was a bit of a hill. Maybe there's so many mailboxes. I don't know how many units are up there. I don't know how much mail he has, but it seems to me like the man disappeared. I don't know where he went. He did not return to the street in any reasonable amount of time. So what even was that? Is that a figment of my imagination? Back to the philosophy of solipsism. Is that, some sort of imagining, right? Did that even really happen? And does it matter? Yeah, well, it happened in that it was experienced as much as anything else here is experienced, seemingly, like within a range of experience. Thank you for liking the stream. It's the least I could do. And then later on in the journey, a different mailman pulled up and jumped out of his mail van, except this was real, actual human mailman. See, the first mailman was NPC normie mailman, not even alive. And then here's how I knew it was living mailman, although I never made the connection. He has this hat, a wide-brimmed hat to keep the sun off of him, and it's been sort of customized over time where he's added tape to it, to keep it functional, and it's sort of decorative. It became decorative and artistic, artsy-fartsy in a way. And then I remembered, oh yeah, I've seen this fellow with the hat, and this is a real actual human. Because my first thought was, egads, is this another NPC mailman to do whatever, whether to vampirically, in I drink your milkshake type shit, I drink your milkshake type shit, the psychic vampirism, whatever that is, it is now my duty to completely drain you, right? Is that the realm's aim in some way? Now temporarily metaphorically in the those tanks from the Matrix, powering the fucking whole, powering the delusion and the illusion. The Energizer Bunny, battery in the back. Well, you the battery, partner. Without falling into conspiracy theories and without falling down rabbit holes. And then what energies and focus and determination is required to climb up out of the various rabbit holes. And yeah, there's entertainment and, again, whimsy and, a certain superiority. But then, that's fun to learn and memorize all of this truther stuff. But then, at some point it's 10 years later and Benton's at a self-checkout in Walmart in Anytown, USA, and just here's some normie, not understanding that, they still think that they can just tell the other people about all these conspiracies as if waking up, air quotes, is a thing. And of course, people once they have the knowledge, they will just transform and fix society. Sure, they won't. Society's already fixed them, or at least what society's based on and comprised of has already fixed them. Another inversion. So seeing this normie, not necessarily a book reader, not really, not done, a somewhat intelligent person, but just watching her go through these various conspiracies. I also one time got into a conversation with a bus driver in Austin, Texas, a black lady who I accidentally triggered her own internal panics around the pandemic and the control of society. And she was like, oh no, that can't happen, because she launched into an entire off the top of her head explanation of QAnon. I mean, went through the whole thing. And I'm basically like, all right, well, thanks for that. We'll be seeing you. And what's the importance or validity of these things? Yeah, Mandela effect. Sure. Okay, great. Where does the royal we go from there? What's the relevance? Again, we're back to context. Can the being internally bootstrap enough to know when to apply which particular aspect of the unreality, and to what end within a particular context or contexts? That's intelligence, or it's part of intelligence. And then imagine being in the so-called truth community and individuals involved in attention seeking and self-aggrandizement for years now, are functioning at some level of arbiter of truth through power games. And I believe that was the theme that Landry on the Modern Men Leaving Again channel was working with, the power games and power dynamics. Truth wielded as instrument of power amongst otherwise disempowered individuals. Person A seeking to gratify themselves using person A using person B for person A's own gratification, and doing that on a more mass scale within a community through a mudding of the waters to imply, well, of course, people want to click up and group up to therefore exist within so-called proper society. And Benton would then, that's a context. So the moment that a form is taken and a context is proffered, well, now Benton or someone of his ilk, if that's a thing, can then become critical and say, well, okay, through critique, if the individuals that are invited into the community haven't internally bootstrapped and are not capable of operating themselves properly within society or community or communal living, how can that be a proper commune or organization? Now, it can be a cult. A cult is not dependent on individuals who have internally bootstrapped and are capable of existing and doing their part within proper society. Quite the contrary. That's a threat to the system in the context of a cult. See? And if we're not talking about mutual consent and a consensus of the governed, right, which is each individual governing themselves, and then governing through the collective, meaning everybody's equal and nothing happens unless there's a consensus, aka the so-called rainbow family, rainbow gatherings. That's how they make their decisions. I don't know if y'all are aware of that. Otherwise, it's because of the wisdom of understanding. To fall one iota short of that is to perform as a cult under a charismatic leader. See, that's just how it works. It's regardless of anybody's intentions. This is how psychology operates within these contexts. Please don't kill the messenger, or maybe do kill the messenger. But Benton would prefer literally rather than metaphorically at this point. Although, it's interesting to see how far down this road of a mastery of self, mastery of emotion, further facilitation of healing, right? And there's been a new level of healing has been received and unlocked on the heels of yesterday's broadcast. There's a peace, harmony, and ease in new areas of the tissues of the physicality, right? Closer and closer to evicting some of these, the most difficult to evict, perhaps, unclean spirits, demonic spirits, wicked spirits, if any of those are hanging around still. Perhaps they've all been exorcised or evicted, but then just the healing and clearing through what? Experiencing the negative stagnated energies that were stagnated within the individual via repression, and probably repression of childhood, and then laying in bed, although it's not a bed, it's the back seat of a Nissan Versa hatchback parked on the streets of Los Angeles, just lying there this morning doing my spiritual practice of breathing through the physiological response to the emotions and the stagnated energies in the tissues and in the dead flesh being alchemically and psychically and spiritually experienced, but first within dream. So within the dream, so vivid dreams involving certain emotional states. So the physiology, in order to clear and release and heal in Benton's experience, the emotion has to be accepted, right? The yin form, it has to be experienced. The only way out is through, and then waking up and then remembering the panicked breathing that was normal for Benton in the past, and then the racing thoughts and fears and all of these things that generally Benton did, basically a panic attack. I used to have a lot of what physiologically would pass for a panic attack, although otherwise have had very, very few, if any, panic attacks in my entire life. And then the racing thoughts, many people having difficulty falling asleep at the end of the day. Benton used to have that many years ago and decades ago, the racing thoughts, making it difficult to drift off into sleep. Never experienced that now. Shouldn't say never, probably, but that's no longer a thing because of a many years long practice of meditation, daily practice. And in fact, in a meditative state about 80% of every day, and that's not an exaggeration. Again, high-level practitioners who you're listening to. This is the advanced course. And there's no requirement. Nothing is required, really. Because what I am can't create those conditions. It can complain about them, and it can complain about, at times, the lack of certain conditions. But ultimately, what I am simply cannot be consistent with its own nature. And the performer, Benton, in the context of the performance, cannot walk the perfected path within. When walking the perfected path within, cannot create such struggles and resistance and friction and knowing only the nature of love, acceptance, tolerance, and all of these things. Again, via worshiper and worshipee, the continuous overflowing of the Spirit being contained within the same space, which is the entire reason for the Christ framework, or the Christ talk, or the Lord Christ Jesus vernacular. It can't ever be dogma or doctrine, because what Christ was, that Spirit doesn't know what dogma and doctrine is. Now, the dead flesh, the so-called Son of Man, within the context of the world of death and the game of lies, certainly the intellect would have necessarily, as rabbi, being referred to as rabbi at various times in the Bible, or teacher, well, that would have necessitated an understanding of these things intellectually. And then, of course, the stories of a young 12-year-old, perhaps Jesus, exhibiting through teaching such a high-level grasp of certain materials related to religion, dogma, doctrine, and spirituality. and probably for his own mission, having to learn these things, because that was he would have intuited most likely, or been shown, or had wisdom bestowed upon him, that, well, this is the form, that the traps and snares that are going to be within this realm that makes an enemy of what Christ was energetically, same as what Benton is energetically. Oh, he's calling himself the Lord again, or God again. No, that's what the accuser says. Let's see. Meanwhile, within this current society, Benton is free to claim that if he chooses, and not be executed. Well, back in the time of Christ, that wasn't allowed, presumably, or apparently. But see how the context must be ruthlessly applied all the way through, or very quickly the way is lost, or very quickly miscreants can rush in and begin a process of ridicule and mockery to inject low-level energetic states of fear, guilt, shame, anxiety, and all of this, and that most beings have very low ability to sit with fear, guilt, shame, anxiety, fear, and all of this, negative states. Take your soma, Theo Vaughn. We're going to get to Theo Vaughn. Theo Vaughn stopped taking his soma. If anybody saw what supposedly happened to Theo Vaughn recently. The comedian from the South. So Benton here probably has a unique perspective on some of Mr. Vaughn's plight, his purported plight. Shout out to the live chat. Thank you for liking the stream. It's the least I could do. Or do they want me to yell at them? The ones who like to be yelled at so they can giggle. The boomer's boomering again. Listen to him boom. Listen to the boomer boom. The boomer's booming again. Well, Gen Z's not allowed to boom. Not that Gen Z's here. That was just more of an observation. The realm no longer allows, at the level of status quo, social contract, conformity to peer groups. There is no more booming. Overt displays of direct anger. Right? And this is what people think they mean when they talk about the so-called feminization of society. Maybe we'll get into that. I have something tied into what historically, especially in the context of me growing up in the Deep South, in a hyper-macho or hyper-masculine culture, within the context of college football, perhaps. The touchy-feely, artsy-fartsy elements having invaded college football. And then the power seekers, the seekers of power, accolades, attention, and the magnifiers of self, such as one Bobby Petrino, now exhibiting a seemingly high level of ability to deal with the football players who are now able to be paid, who are now in some way mercenaries, to be able to actively manage not the college football players' emotions, in fact, the emotions of mommy. Because remember, a lot of these kids that are college football age, they didn't grow up with a father at all, and if they did, that was a weak father, most likely. And so, unfortunately, these males, competitive, masculine, testosteronized males, grew up under conditions that Benton knows nothing about, where mommy's emotions and service of mommy's emotions were front and center on a daily basis. Benton catching the last wave, perhaps, of being able to pass from boyhood to manhood with almost never having to contend with mommy's emotions, except through what? Mommy's anxiety. Mommy had off the charts anxiety. And that was, the entire family was subjected to that, her anxieties at certain points. And maybe that's some of the healing and the stagnated traumas, or whatever you want to call them, these gross stagnated energies. So waking up this morning and see, here's the practice. Because physiologically the being might say, oh, this is horrible, whatever that physiological state is, cortisol, stress hormones, racing thoughts, fear, right? And not the emotion of fear from Benton's perspective. And again, I'm only able to experience this within delusion and illusion and within myself. So I don't know what this is like for other people, but Benton developed his own methods for coping with this, right? Which is being able to breathe through it and maintain calm breathing while the heartbeat increases, while still overall centered and peaceful, while watching the thoughts but remaining detached, and also undergoing an analytical process of, well, Benton, at some point in the near future, perhaps you will be going back to truck driving, or just whatever's going on in the mind, and then remembering the content of the dream. And then now we get to something that's very much lacking, and this is what I talk about with the internal bootstrapping and the individuals much do better. It's to lay there and trust in what I am. Shout out to Flava Flav from Fear of a Black Planet, one of my favorite albums. Although it's a bit dated sounding, but 1990s Fear of a Black Planet. Who I trust, me. Who you trust, man? So to trust and accept and tolerate and to surrender, right? No spiritual surrender means no spiritual victory. To surrender to this process and allow it to happen. See, that is the practice, or one of the practices, or part of the practice. And without the practice, look at how quickly the individual is transacting business with the medical system. Medical coding and billing give us the soma, which in Benton's opinion means not a real human being, if that's even a thing. Because if a person is taking antidepressants, anti-anxiety, and other medications, and they cannot experience, say, the bottom 20% of emotion, the negative emotion, if that's off the table, is that even an actual real human being in the way that Benton is a real actual human being? Because Benton still remembers 15 or however many years ago walking the streets of Austin, Texas, early in the morning, but probably had been up all night at this point in the city, because sometimes there's really nowhere to sleep. Or maybe just get a nap here and there. And I don't know if people realize how homeless as fuck Benton has been. Right? Oh, been there, buddy. Homeless as fuck. Homeless AF at times. And just being very aware of nearly overpowering emotions of worthlessness, helplessness, uselessness, despair, the very depths of despair. And just thinking, man, this is horrible. But understanding even then, because of, again, spiritual attainment and spiritual practice, like there's really nothing to be solved here. There's no mental health system to go to. There's no meds to take. Right? I mean, there are. But how does that serve the being? Well, it doesn't serve the being. Not in my opinion, not based on Benton's And again, it was probably an understanding, if not verbalized, of, hey, what's the point of going through how horrific this is? The overall experience of life, which is death. Remember, life is a breakfast cereal. Mikey likes it. And so to take the soma and go to the mental health system and to do all of these things is to Mikey likes it, the death. That's to Mikey likes the death. All they that hate what I am love death. That's Mikey eating the fucking bowl of life, or death in this case. What is referred to as life. See, the realm symbolically mocking and ridiculing what I am yet again through what? Mikey symbolizing something not that far removed from spiritual perfection and innocence, but having already been sacrificed to Moloch, industrial society, vacuous, delusory, adversarial realm of business transactions. And it is Benton's understanding and contention and assertion that all beings, if they are what I am, the subconscious mind perfectly decodes all of this symbology, meaning on some level, the royal we, or this idea that we are all one on some level. Well, maybe it's the subconscious, unseen, symbolic level of, Carl Jung, man and his symbols, or Jung, however we're pronouncing it, Jung, man and his symbols. Which again, do I need to read the book? If the major theme of the book is that the subconscious mind perfectly decodes the symbols within the environment, and then Benton extrapolates, well, then everybody on some level knows exactly what the fuck's going on here. And wouldn't it have to be that way in the context of a spiritual war? Right? And wouldn't that be a version of Christianity's notion of you got to spread the good news? And then it's like the idea, the meme of some Inuit or some indigenous person somewhere saying, well, are you telling me that all this legalese and dogma and doctrine and, being cast into the pits of hell, none of that implied until a Christian tracked me down and taught me all of this and taught me the Bible, right? Well, I would say that it seems like the subconscious working on symbols perfectly, that would account for what Christianity seemingly takes credit for. And then turning that into the business of ministry and the business of proselytizing and preaching and being a pastor, and Saul of Tarsus on the road to Damascus, most likely visited by Lucifer, the brilliant angel, passing himself off for Christ. Or maybe even Saul saying, yeah, okay, I'll accept this bargain, at his version of Robert Johnson's Crossroads, right? Whatever that was. And then Saul of Tarsus immediately saying, well, okay, now I need my commission as the Apostle Paul signed off on by Ananias or the Christian church, right? And then Christians, I'm supposed to believe that these Christians are vibrating on such a level and they have Christ, whatever that means, or they've found Christ, but they can't figure that out. So mockery, spiritual attack, the enemy of what I am, religion itself, dead, demonic, adversarial, right? Predatory. The church doesn't pay taxes, but tells the people who come into the building, and that the ones that choose to fall under the authority of the church, well, no, y'all pay your taxes. We don't. The church doesn't pay its taxes. Y'all pay your taxes. Oh, okay. Makes total sense to me. Why not? But again, back to lying on my side in the seat, can't even stretch out all the way. Knees, not at the fetal position exactly, but and breathing through all of that, and then remembering that I let the fucking dystopia mind fuck me into years and years and years of daily Wim Hof breathing to the detriment of my own health, right? But it probably did help me master the breathing, I have to say. I do have to say that. It certainly helped level up, again, the only way out is through. Yeah, detrimental to the organs and the body and the energies. And I think this is part of what Theo Vaughn's going through, if I can get into that a little bit. I've managed to make it this far without looking at the notes, so I don't know. I'm not, maybe inclined to continue riffing. And if anybody feels like donating, Old Benton's okay, but again, Amazon gift cards as good as cash. CVS and Walgreens, if one wants to, one may purchase with cash money if people even have cash money these days. And I don't mean digital versus cash. I just mean if they have money at all. Air quotes in this economy. Ha ha ha. I won't even get into the economy right now, but if folks feel compelled, of course there's a Cash App and a Venmo, but none of this is necessary. And Benton at some point perhaps will stop handling money entirely, but we ain't there yet. But maybe, we'll see. It's possible. Still trying to figure out if Old Benton's even going to be able to return to truck driving or not. So we're coming up on 30 days off the off the cron. Coming up on 30 days off the cannabis. I believe the 6th or the 7th will be 30 days. No cron. And I know people will immediately say, oh, there's ways to beat those tests. Oh, yeah, you think Benton doesn't know how to beat a test? How do you beat the rando? Because I passed the test to get into truck driving school, and they randoed me a week later. How do you pass the week later rando, partner? You pass it by waiting 30 motherfucking days before you take the first one. If you can't the art of war on my level, what you gonna tell me, Jack? Again, the word of mouthing of everything via conventional wisdom and so-called common sense. No thanks. Didn't come down to this place to engage in poppycock notions of word of mouth, conventional wisdom, and so-called common sense that doesn't exist in the first place. I'm good on all that. Have fun. Y'all enjoy yourselves with the common sense. How's that working out for you? Anyway, let's not attack the audience just yet, Old Benton feller. If at all. Right. Okay, I guess we're going to go to the Theo Vaughn. And I'm not even going to play this. I know a lot of people don't pay attention to this type of material, but Benton does. There's a lot of channels that follow these various podcasters. And let's not forget Theo Vaughn. It got so big and so famous that he gets millions of views on a lot of his podcasts. And he is a big enough podcaster to be able to interview Trump. So he's fairly near the Rogan level, at least as far as the size of the channels and all of this. Right. Not as influential, certainly, but. And Theo Vaughn hailing from southeast Louisiana, I believe, and culturally southern. And I'll get into his psychology. I've been actually, folks may not know this. I became a big fan of Theo's before I had any notions of him as a comedian, because I began watching MTV's The Real World as it unfolded from season 1, and I watched, no bullshit, in real time, probably the first 20 seasons of The Real World. Not kidding. And so I also watched the Road Rules, and Theo was on, I believe, the first season of Road Rules, but my memory fails me at a certain point. And that would have been when I was in college. And maybe it was a later season. And I'm 5 years older than Theo, apparently. And I actually became a fan of his. He was on the season with, there was a Kit. And then there was this blonde-haired Chad dude. Forget his name, but basically like a Ken doll type of fella. I'm assuming there was a Barbie in there somewhere, but I don't recall. I mainly remember Theo and Kit. But then in the it's funny, I can't remember the blonde. Well, there were a couple of attractive chicks, actually. But I think personality-wise, I was more enamored with Kit, right? Um, and I may even be conflating some of these people. Uh, I don't remember the Chad guy having much of a personality. Um, but yeah, Theo certainly seemed to be the spiritual center of the show, if that was a thing. And I think he would have been like 17 or 18 at the time. And then so I heard nothing from Theo except occasionally, somewhere on the internet I might see an old clip from Road Rules or catching, an old, replaying of a clip on MTV or whatever, MTV2 perhaps, and always somewhat plugged into the culture. And then he resurfaced as a or surfaced as a stand-up comedian. And as much as people like to say that these comedians are terrible, well, just comedy's dead, folks. The animated death warmed over culture is it's dead on arrival. It used to, through the subversion of the creative force, it seemed to have life, right? Bill Maher, you can make all the fun of him you want. He used to be a very, very good stand-up comedian. Theo Vaughn, when he first started doing stand-up, was funny. Uh, and I know this because I understand comedy on some level, as far as at least being able to watch it and sort of break it down and analyze it, even as I'm not really able to do it myself, because I'm unable to predict if something I'm about to say is going to cause people to burst into laughter. I don't know that that's about to happen. So it happens to me intermittently in my life, but I have no awareness that is part of the undiagnosed fake autism. I don't have no idea that that's about to happen, which just makes it even more funny because I'm standing there like, just like, what happened? So what's been making the rounds are these clips of Theo Vaughn taping his latest Netflix special, which he makes big bucks from. And he's gone off the rails, and he's a drug addict who apparently doesn't take drugs. Well, but he does, because he said, yeah, that he chose to go off his antidepressant. So yeah, but I mean, like, he was on cocaine and whatever else for years, and then supposedly cleaned himself up. Um, and I know about handlers, and we don't need to go into the handler, MK Ultra's agent of the system. I did a recent stream where I pretty much made the case that everybody's a systems agent, whether they know it or not. So there's really no reason to go into a debunking of, whatever may or may not exist of Theo Vaughn's actual humanity, at the level of being MK Ultra, fucking staged actor, managed, handled, mind controlled. Is it that much different than anybody else at this point? I would say not really. Now, certainly the level of fame and attention and money, although I think the money's way less than we may think, that's certainly a thing. And apologies for the long setup, but sometimes this is necessary. And then, me understanding a particular context culturally, so and then some of this is a humiliation ritual, right? There's also the humiliation ritual elements. Well, your job is a humiliation ritual for most of you. Now, whether or not you choose to see it that way, but whoever's off to hi ho, it's off to work they go, whether they understand it or not. Maybe if you're of my generation or the boomer generation, I mean, there is no Gen X online, so same fucking thing, but I don't know what Uncle Rick does for a living, but I understand that your generation and my generation don't necessarily consider it humiliating to go do and again, I don't know, I'm just assuming if it's something involving a name tag, a uniform, some public facing corporate type shit. I mean, who knows? My own mother doing that type of work now. Although, anyway, it doesn't even matter, but at the age of 70. And see, to our generations, there's no humiliation in that, because that was the bootstrap hard work as as morality, hard work as part of the identity. Still, the programming of rugged individualism and all of this. Well, the younger generations understand the humiliation. They understand that, it is humiliating. The millennials and Gen Z understand, yeah, this is humiliation ritual. So, is it really relevant that Theo Von in these clips where he's, in one clip he's explaining to the troops that, yeah, his stand-up performance was just terrible. And he even commented at a certain point, basically, I'm just trying not to, and I'm not even going to repeat it, but that he's trying not to self-delete. And yeah, it's a comedian, so people laughed at it, but he means that. He's going through an existential crisis that he probably doesn't understand. And so then we might listen to uh, him explaining himself. That actually, you won't even need to, he'll explain it enough that it won't even really be necessary for me to set it all up. So let's see, Theo Von explains, should get us there. Maybe. Although he's probably explained a lot of things. Yeah, that's not specific enough. Explains bomb. Can you say bomb on a stream? Yeah, Theo Von addresses bombing on stage. Shout out to one of my favorite channels, Unique Entertainment. YEWNEEK Entertainment. So this is a great way to keep up with some of these various communities because I'm never going to watch any of this content. So I'll just quick share this video if I can. Oh no, that's a different thing. Let me see if I can share this. Share. Come on, Boomer. Copy link. Yeah, let's see if we can drop this in the chat, perhaps. Where is my stream? There's my stream. What up, Christos? I see you down there. Slick Rick, new name. Or is that Uncle Rick? Don't know. Shout out to the chat. Sermon over, I guess, because some folks have left the stream, but I don't know that it matters. But yeah, here's a link to, I believe, this video, if anybody's interested. And you can subscribe to this channel if you want. And, the guy who does it's a bit of a smarmy bozo, but who cares? It's, again, I'm not gonna follow this material, so I'm glad he's there to give me curated clips. And it's very clickbaity. Just be aware of that. It's off the charts clickbait, but YouTube's a clickbait platform anyway. What's the difference? But yeah, here's Theo Von addresses bombing on stage at his Netflix special.
Oh, like what went on, and it wasn't that crazy what went on, and I wish it was going to be a more exciting story, but I just want to, yeah, I just want to share with you kind of what happened, I guess. And I don't want to make it a big deal, but I think, but I do want to like just kind of go into it, right? So mental health is important to me, right? It's important to me. We talk about that kind of stuff on here a lot. And hold on. So I had a comedy special that we were taping. We were taping it last week, and about a month before I quit taking some antidepressants I was taking. I just kind of self-weaned myself off. And the reason why was because
Now, and apologies, but y'all know I can't get through a clip without pausing. But this is something because I've read a lot, and I've taken in a lot of material about like champion athletes, and coaches of champion athletes, especially in track and field. I came across a concept of, don't get a haircut right before the big meet, right? Because it's sort of an acknowledgement of you've really been working hard. Maybe you've overtrained if you haven't, if you've forgotten yourself enough that you're now like, wait a minute, I got to go get my hair cut right before this big track meet. Maybe it's the Olympics, maybe it's the World Championships, maybe it's the state track meet. So the coach is basically saying like, this is a bad sign, right? That your hair needs to be cut, and you've been obsessively, so that indicates obsession. So the coach is noting, right, like, don't live in a way of obsession to then it's 2 days before the track meet and it's like, oh, it's time to get a haircut. Theo Von got the metaphorical haircut of he went off his anxiety meds right before the big track meet or the World Championships or the Olympics. if we look at this as a sport. So this is in him not understanding that, wait a minute, this is a bad sign. Because if he was going to go off his anxiety meds, why didn't he go off his anxiety meds when he was working the actual material? Because these people develop their hour or hour and a half of material. They take, like 9 months or a year to develop and hone and tailor all of this material. And so then him getting the psych meds, that's a version of getting a haircut, because in order to perform the actual literal haircut is part of the process. But so he's basically in his spiritual creative process. So he undertook his creative, and creativity can't be separated from spirituality, in my view. He undertook this process, but then he got the haircut right before the track meet. See. And so he doesn't even seem to understand the significance of, he's just matter of fact, like, well, I went off my psych meds a week before the big track meet. What are you talking about, buddy? Huh?
So mental health is important to me, right? It's important to me. We talk about that kind of stuff on here a lot.
Prove it. So first he's saying, well, mental health is important to me. Then he's saying, I went off my meds a week before the big meet. But then, okay, but is this self-sabotage? And is this an addict needing a reason to go do drugs? See, who's on the verge of, and again, this is part of the reason Benton doesn't identify as sober, because there can only be relapse. Sobriety is the only thing that can lead to relapse. I'm going to go have 3 glasses of red wine later today if I want to, because I ain't sober. Meanwhile, last week I got drunk at 140 pounds with no tolerance on 8 drinks over, 5 hours. And it took me 5 whole days to recover, and I don't get hangovers. And I'm just now back to normal, I would say. This morning I thought, yeah, I'm back to normal. It's back to normal. Not quite as, I was on kind of a peak before I got drunk, but I'm back to normal. But I had hit a bit of a crescendo with my energy levels, and I was running around at times, like physically running and stuff, like not as a sport, but just if I needed to run down the street, I would run down the street. But here's the thing is, that wasn't a relapse because I'm not sober. So there's no existential crisis. There's no gnashing of teeth. There's no, oh, I better get to an AA meeting. There's no, now I need to consult the gurus. It's like, no, I'm a human being who got fucking drunk, and it hurt my health for 5 days. And hey, dummy, not beating myself up, but it's like, hey, you're a fool. Like, let's laugh at the bozo for preaching all of these and practicing all of these very healthy diet and certain supplements. But in a way, there was a benefit to the poison, but only in the context of that which does not kill me makes me stronger. In some ways, I am stronger, or not I am, but Benton's physicality and seemingly has facilitated some of the recent healing. So, that wasn't the intention of getting drunk, but as long as I understand what led to the spree, as long as it doesn't continue, and as long as I'm able to work with it and contextualize it properly, it ends up being a negative in some ways and a positive in other ways. So it sort of just comes out to a zero burger, a nothing burger, right? But if I was operating from a context of sobriety, and in fact, part of my self-identity is sobriety, well, now there's a relapse. No, there's no relapse because I'm not sober. Now, yesterday, I proclaimed that I might go, and here's how I don't drink. Here's how I don't drink is if I have a desire to drink, I'll just say, okay, well, then we're going to have some beers later. And then I just don't, and then later on, I'm like, nah, because that's going to interrupt my routine, because I have to completely reconfigure my entire afternoon in order to even have alcohol, which means, well, I got to make sure I eat my last meal at a certain time. I'm more or less addicted to these egg yolk drinks, so that I'm probably not going to be able to have the evening egg drink. And, I'm going to have I've been having a bonus early afternoon egg drink. So if I'm going to have that first, that's probably going to have to be an hour earlier than normal. How does that affect the prior meal? It's the whole thing. right? So at a certain point, it's decision time. So yesterday, I'm like, are you going to go have, are you going to go buy the $5.75 boxed wine, the little box of, it's 3 glasses of wine, it's three 5-ounce glasses of wine? It's like, no, I'm not. So when I just said that right now, in a way, my brain doesn't understand that I haven't had alcohol today. As far as my mind is concerned, and this is where a lot of folks don't recognize that they undo themselves when they want to accomplish something, they just speak it out loud and say, oh, I'm going to do this thing. Well, your brain doesn't know that you haven't done it. Your brain thinks you've done it. Now there's no reason to do it. So my brain later today won't, it just doesn't know, because I've now promised myself 3 glasses of wine. Well, who cares if I actually drink them or not? I've done this every day for months at a time, and not out of a white knuckling discipline. I've been delivered from the wicked spirit of alcohol. It's just why shouldn't I entertain a notion of 3 glasses of wine, which I know won't do anything to me. But I know if I go buy the 3 glasses of wine and I go over to the barber shop of where my drunk friend hangs out, and I saw him yesterday morning and he was already drunk because somebody had left him half a handle of Jack Daniels, is what he woke up to this morning. So he was already drunk, which is fine. Who cares? That's fine. I've been drunk many times. I don't give a fuck. But that's his life. But I know not to go over there, because that means I'm probably would end up drinking three beers after that. And once I've had 6 drinks, whatever happens, happens. As far as if I want to keep going, I'm going to keep going. And the 8 almost became 10 on stream, because I was in a Vaughn's looking at the beer and then was like, well, I don't want any of this beer. Believe me, if they would have had a 24-ounce beer that appealed to me, I would have bought it. 100%. At that point, I was drunk. Who cares? So Theo is probably, I don't know if he's relapsed or not, but he's seemingly on the verge of a relapse. He's definitely on the verge of a mental breakdown. And what better way to, now he knows, as an addict and as a sober person on the verge of a relapse, part of his brain knows there needs to be built-in excuses. Well, what better excuse than, hey, a week before the big track meet or the big Netflix special, I went off my meds. Well, who made that decision? Right? And a self-undoing or a self-destruction. And why doesn't he understand this about himself? And I mean understand it internally, mind, body, and spirit. Benton knows exactly what the fuck's going on inside of him, mind, body, and spirit. Or in the case of the drunken spree, he figures it the fuck out. That's the function of the 5 days of feeling like garbage without a hangover. No hangover, just felt like shit for 3 solid days, and then it took another 2 days to get back to normal from one poisoning, right? And that was the period of time when Benton pieced together exactly what happened. And I won't get into all of it because some of it is personal and just not that interesting. But there are some spiritual attack angles. But and Theo's being spiritually attacked, and he's going to tell you how he's been spiritually attacked. So let me get back to the clip. My apologies.
Yeah, I just want to share with you kind of what happened, I guess. And I don't want to make it a big deal, but I think, but I do want to just kind of go into it, right? So mental health is important to me, right? It's important to me. We talk about that kind of stuff on here a lot. And hold on. So I had a comedy special that we were taping. We were taping it last week, and about a month before I quit taking some antidepressants I was taking. I just kind of self-weaned myself off. And the reason why was because I wanted, during the comedy show, I wanted to have a little bit more emotion during it. I wanted to have this kind of, I just wanted to have some more feelings. If you ever taken antidepressants, or if you haven't, it kind of takes away your feelings, kind of.
Well, and I want to get into the taking away of the feelings, and I already covered that to some extent, but he's throwing himself into the deep end of the pool, right? The time to go off the antidepressants, sir, would be after the comedy special has successfully been completed. Then how about make a new hour and don't take the antidepressants, and then spend a year crafting the next special, but don't take the meds, right? If the state that created the material was in part fueled by antidepressants and psych meds, and his actual performance is crafted, what makes him think he's even capable of, as he sees he's not capable of performing. He needs the same internal space to do the performance creatively. He's altered the internal space.
Like during the comedy show, I wanted to have a little bit more emotion during it.
Well, and what's he describing here is chaos. So the order of the last year, right? The orderliness of taking the meds to bring order to the chaos of the mental health and whatever internal states are going on, right? It's an ordering of the chaos. So now he's seemingly attracted to chaos, right?
It's kind of like, I just wanted to have some more feedback.
Which is a lack of masculinity, in a way. In a way.
You know, if you've ever taken antidepressants, or if you haven't, it kind of takes away your feelings, kind of. You know, so you just kind of stay in this space where you're okay, and it's nice. It's a safe space, but you don't. You're like the astronaut that kind of stays on the ship sometimes, and you get to do the thumbs up and shit. But other dudes are like, you know, but other people are out there. Anyway, so I quit taking my medication because I wanted to have a little bit more feelings during the show. I wanted to be able to talk about stuff a little bit more that meant something to me, and put it into the comedy show. So that was all going fine, right?
Well,
I was doing fine.
by the way,
we were headed into the comedy show.
What he just described is, you know, again, another book I haven't bothered to read, but Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, if that's the right guy. That's what it sounds like. Maybe I'm wrong, you know, maybe I will be spiritually attacked and critiqued for not bothering to read the book, but, you know, is Theo not describing his own search for meaning, which Krishnamurti would say that's completely fine and appropriate, as long as the being understands that their motivation is in fact representative of a search for meaning. And this is what I mean by death coach. You know, the fact that Benton is not provided for within the realm to function as a shaman, which I would argue is a death coach in a way, meaning not this life coach, because this ain't life. This external realm experiences death. Right, and that's in the notes. But, you know, Benton can't function as a death coach because this realm, because of how it's set up through status quo, social contract, and peer groups, and the vacuous, delusory, adversarial business transacting, I have to package a product and sell it. Right? The realm, as constructed and operated, is incapable of allowing individuals to just say, well, hey, here's a useful Benton, and all he wants is a shack out back with an internet connection and a winder unit and a place to set up his streamer equipment, and to be able to, a local area where he can walk around unmolested early in the morning, and to be able to walk to the store without getting in a car and driving, right? So a city. This would not be hard to do. There's people who have this who could freely give it, but they can't freely give it because of status quo, peer groups, and social contracts. They're precluded from, they're slaves who are, they can't freely give these things. So it's up to Benton to package the death coach business and sell it as a product, which then it's no longer, it now can't be the thing that it would otherwise be.
The Charlie Kirk thing happened, right? The Charlie Kirk murder happened, which is really crazy. You know, it's just a crazy thing. I've talked about it before. I'm not going to talk about it anymore right now. But a few days after that, or maybe a week after that, the Department of Homeland Security put a video up online talking about, they started making like trap beat edits and like banger edits to evicting people from the country, right?
Well, that's not the point. Whoever that is in the chat, that's a tangential issue. It doesn't matter the reasons. The reasons are not relevant, just so you know. At least not in the context in which I'm speaking. And this is a good example of what I talked about earlier, the mud. Let's stop here. So the commenter says, and this is not an attack of the commenter. This is a critique of the comment as written. Theo Vaughn was using ghostwriters. That is why he didn't know any of the punchlines. Well, whether or not that's true is irrelevant to the purposes of the discussion. And so what, and the commenter probably doesn't understand, the commenter is removing context. So the discussion that's happening via the discourse is in a context or a collection of contexts, right? And what you've done, and again, it's not a critique of the commenter. It's a demonstration of something that I talked about earlier in the stream, which is a muddying of the waters by either changing context or more regularly seeking to remove context entirely, right? And I also do this. I'm a know-it-all type who I've regularly gone into live chats and just typed whatever I happen to believe I know, which may or may not be true. Because later on I might realize, well, wait a minute, I'm misremembering, or maybe I'm playing a hunch that I don't really, I can't validate or prove, right? I don't have insider information. Maybe it's an intuition, and maybe the intuition is absolutely correct. But then what I've chosen to do over time is discipline myself to not put, and it's putting one's own stink on a performance, right? And believe me, I've done it plenty of times. So this is not to dismiss, and thank you for being here and thank you for listening. It's not to diminish anybody's comments or engagement with the stream. It's to point out a thing that's happening. And that's the death coach element is, any of us, myself included, can, if we choose to, do better, right? And if somebody had convincingly told me this 3 years ago, I probably would have knocked the fuck off, because I was running around 3 or 4 years ago doing that exact thing. So, I mean, and again, what I am can't identify at the level of fear, guilt, and shame and ridicule. So that's not my intention here, is to have somebody feel embarrassed or feel guilt or feel or experience shame. That's not the goal of me responding that way. It's I'm viewing the comment as a symptom of a greater issue, and especially if there are individuals in a so-called truth community, and I'm not saying that the commenter is that, but in the context of a so-called truth community like this, that level at one time was arguably appropriate and fine. It's no longer good enough, because in order to push things forward along a progression, at some point, what was appropriate in the past must be abandoned in order to get to the new thing in a progression, right? So really the only point I'm making is this is no longer the thing, right? Because again, there's numerous different channels to go to, and I go to a lot of them, because part of my entertaining myself as I walk around listening to my earbuds is to listen to people's opinions about, well, why did this happen to Theo? And some of it is seeking to excuse the behavior. And who or what does that serve? That serves the vacuous, delusory, adversarial realm of business transactions, which through advertising and marketing, and this was borne out through the Don Draper character in Mad Men, who at a certain point is on a road trip looking at billboards, and he's talking about, woven into the fabric of America is, advertising it functions to make the individual always feel like whatever they happen to be doing in any given moment, it's absolutely correct and appropriate, which is a way to what? For corporations to eventually profit for corporations to eventually make a profit on every new moment of an individual's life. And now we're back to the function of the economy is to make rich people richer every moment unto perpetuity. So I don't necessarily have a problem with that comment. I have a problem with it when it's just in a vacuum, seemingly is not going somewhere. It's a bit of a non sequitur, even though it seems to pertain. And, is the being merely seeking to relate to a concept of Theo Von or the concept of a Theo Von performance? Meanwhile, your broadcaster is making larger points. And again, not inappropriate. It's just a thing that and it helps Benton in a way, because now Benton has an opportunity to discipline himself and not allow himself to go into certain states of frustration. So, and this ties into yesterday's stream, which was supposed to be about meditating in anger. So now I get to continue, now I get to be slightly annoyed and irritated, which is a form of anger. I get to experience that while continuing the discourse and while doing my own internal process in which also now some of the stagnated low-level energies, as I do more stretching and yoga in my shoulders and my upper back, some of this can actually leave. So in fact, the commenter is helping in a way, whether they know it or not. But I do intellectually, I do disdain the content of that comment on some level, but you know, can't really do anything about that. And again, apologies if that seemed overly harsh. It's just it is what, I don't know what else to say. It's congruent with the rest of my personality, sadly, or maybe not sadly. Who knows? Don't know. I was trying not to read so much into it.
Eliminating illegals, maybe some criminals, some people just undocumented, all just across the spectrum, right?
Got to back up here a little bit.
Video anymore right now. But a few days after that, or maybe a week after that, the Department of Homeland Security put a video up online talking about they started making like trap beat edits and like banger edits to evicting people from the country, right?
So first you had the Charlie Kirk thing, which was a spiritual attack on the people who are at a degenerated enough level to be spiritually attacked by such a thing, right? And thankfully Benton is no longer in that camp, although certainly would have been, although not Charlie Kirk specifically, but just, someone, well, and that's not true because I was spiritually attacked. And so first I got drunk, and then I was dealing with, and probably part of the reason I got drunk was because this new Paul Thomas Anderson One Battle After Another movie was coming out, and it was looking like that was going to get a lot of traction, and they were talking about an early release for the award season, and Paul Thomas Anderson, has a pretty decent batting average with these movies that get a lot of acclaim. There Will Be Blood was a big deal, and I'm a big fan of films, and not a huge PTA guy, but I like a lot of his films. Not a huge fan of his overall, but definitely enjoyed a number of his films. Big fan of There Will Be Blood, of course. But I would say that's the only one he's ever made that really, really spoke to me at some deep level. And even that was limited compared to even something like Schenectady, New York by, and there's no reason to denigrate the man. We don't need to debunk the man, but Charlie Kaufman. And yeah, I understand everything that implies. We don't need to go there. No need to go there. But I believe me, I'm well aware of any criticisms that could be levied. And so then I freaked out. I had several different freakouts in my weakened, spiritually attacked state. Some of it self-inflicted. So, some of what Theo's going through is that the Charlie Kirk thing that he was susceptible to, and then further exacerbating it by going off of his meds, right? Which I would say is probably a good thing in the long run, but his timing was off. And then he's going to be viewed in a certain way in the current political climate. Theo Vaughn, white male, Southern accent, interviewed Trump, right? Masculine, testosterone. But he's coming out of the world of LA, right? He's an LA person on some level, whether he wants to admit it or not. Yeah, you move to Nashville all you want, Theo. Theo's completely internalized the LA to some extent. And it's like you look into the abyss and the abyss looks into you type shit, right? Like where do you think he did all this cocaine? Like he's gazed into the abyss of LA, and he's been forever changed as a result, right? And the entertainment industry and all of this, and that's a bell that cannot be unrung. And so now he's going to describe what happened, what Homeland Security's done to him.
Eliminating illegals, maybe some criminals, some people just undocumented, all just across the spectrum, right? So they put a video of mine that I'd made for somebody in a parking lot, probably like maybe a year and a half ago, just jokingly. I think it was a year and a half ago. They put it in at the front of this Department of Homeland Security, like trap beat. I think they had I'm not sure if they had like young boilers or whatever they had, but it was ridiculous. And the video was a girl that walked up to me in a parking lot. 5 million, 30 million views. It's everywhere. And the front of that Homeland Security video, it's on the White House thing. It's on everything. It's everywhere. And the first 10 seconds of it are me, right? Like, I don't have anything to do with this shit. Nobody asked me about it.
They don't have to.
Hey, this is gonna have
You're a
And I
public
have a lot of
figure.
different thoughts about immigration, right? They're like showing people getting arrested. Like, it's just an intense thing. Like, and why is the government even making these? I don't know. But that's where we're at in the
What
world.
do you mean?
And
Why?
and I have a lot of thoughts about immigration, right? I have a ton of them, and we don't need to go into them all. Like, dude, what the fuck? Just all kind of shit, right? Like, my phone just blew. I'm like, what the hell? It's just like the last thing I needed, right? There's a week left to this special, and this happens. You know, this thing comes out. And my father immigrated here from Nicaragua, right? Like, so that had me really kind of paranoid. You know, that had me start to get kind of paranoid, and you know, like closing, like, you know, I had the curtains in my house kind of closed. I was just like, you know, you're paranoid. I woke up the next morning. Sorry, I need some water. I woke up the next morning to a text from a high government official saying, "Hey, if you need some extra security in your neighborhood or some extra police cars on patrol, let me know." And I'm like, "What? What are you talking about? Extra security? I don't have any. Like, you know, I don't even know the code to my Ring camera. Like, I don't even know how to log in." So it's like, and like, what, you're just gonna put police cars in my neighborhood? What are my neighbors gonna think now? They're fearful. Like, it's just like, I don't know this thing with security. But then you get a security person, and they now if you're walking on a security guy, then that's kind of uncomfortable. Because now you're like, it kind of makes you spooked. You're like, what's going on? So there's just like all of that's happening, and then we get to just the job, right? Like, which is performing, speaking in front of strangers. Like, you just seen this thing with Charlie Kirk, right? Like we all watch somebody get lit up. We all watch somebody get murdered casually on our phones, right? Like, and I don't mean to say it like that, but that's how it came across to us. There's no warning on a lot of video you see, and like, so just a lot of I think unnecessary pressure, a lot of stress going on that I did. Some of it I was aware of, and some of it you just don't know you're aware of it. I think, you know, because I think like feel kind of mildly manic. I think it was just being off the medication. I think, and it wasn't insane. It was just little things. Like the second I got on stage, the first show, I couldn't feel any moisture in my mouth, and I started to feel like,
Well, and realistically, whether we'll take him at his word that he went off his meds, but he's actually describing cocaine abuse. I mean, I've never used it, not even one time, but what I know of abusing cocaine is he's describing abusing cocaine. This is so whether it's going off the meds or cocaine, it doesn't really matter, but because he's explaining the state he was in.
you ever remember that feeling if you were in high school and you got high and then you were standing there talking to your friends and you were just too high and you were just literally standing there just trying to pretending to be yourself a little bit? So I had a little bit of that going on. And it started off choppy. The first show, it started off kind of choppy. We were doing like a new intro with Joey Diaz at the last minute, and he was pretty good. And then I took an ice bath between the shows. I was doing my yoga, the same usual stuff.
I took an ice bath between shows. I was doing my yoga. So when what I interpret this is as Wim Hof breathing, which I did every single day for years, and I know exactly what that does. And what I experienced, it wasn't good. Yeah, there was definitely some benefit to some of it, and I've done the ice baths, although not every day. But now the Wim Hof breathing definitely goes good with the ice bath, right? And this is meditative to put oneself into an ice bath for however many minutes, and remain calm and that is meditative, right? And then I think it's this idea that there's health benefits. I mean, there are, but I think it's overstated, just in my opinion. And again, I've done it, so I know what I'm talking about. I was doing it quite regularly at a certain point, but yeah, and this is also the notion of ice baths. Like now we're getting into Joe Rogan territory. Like how many of these people in the Rogan sphere, they've sort of signed themselves up to this like spiritual, like spirit quest via what Joe Rogan recommends. Like carnivore diet maybe, and cannabis perhaps, I don't know, and just all of these various things. Ice baths, Wim Hof, whatever it may be.
Anyway, sorry, I know this is getting long, but and then we did the second show, and the second show started out fire. First 22 minutes, we're cooking, and then I couldn't remember stuff. And we didn't put a teleprompter. We've done it for other specials. We didn't do it. And
well, apologies for stopping again, but I don't know if folks remember this, but when I tested for my CDL, when he talks about he knew something was wrong, and he talked about something about his mouth being dry. What I realized is that I thrive competitively. Like if I'm on the spot and I'm prepared, when it's go time, historically, old Benton here thrives under pressure if he knows that there's going to be pressure. But so I remember waiting to take my skills test for my CDL which you do like these backing maneuvers. And if folks don't know, I was terrible at the backing maneuvers. Me and this chick were the worst in the class at the backing maneuvers. And I remember thinking before we tested, I should have been nervous. But I'm one of these people that I sort of always been able to work with the nerves. And I remember thinking, why am I not nervous? And thinking, this can't be good. And then I went out and failed the part where you just back up straight, where you don't even do a maneuver. And people say, well, how is this possible? I don't know. Until you get into an 18-wheeler and you try to back it up in a straight line, I really can't describe it. But trust me, you can't, unless you have experience driving an 18-wheeler, you can't get in one right now and back it up in a straight line. Unless some people are just naturally good at backing them up. And I was on the low end of the spectrum for backing. And then, so now I get to come back, and of course, a lot of people failed. A lot of people failed the road test. So now I get to come back the next day with everybody else. And of course, I'm, aced everything, no problem. And did fucking fantastic on the road test. I was the best driving forward of the entire class. And in fact, I mastered they have a pre-trip inspection. And real quick, before we get back to Theo, this shows you how the realm tries to trick you, that we had this notion about, so I want to know the form of the test. So we're tested, the state of Texas under federal regulations is testing us on our ability to do a proper pre-trip. So the examiner has certain metrics they have to look for. So we're told, okay, my teacher at a certain point says, well, there's 3 different forms of the test, Form A, Form B, and Form C. And that has to do with, because there's not enough time to have you do an entire 45-minute pre-trip. So they tell you which section of the big rig to pre-trip. But what I found was, as a person with undiagnosed fake autism, you can't just tell me, okay, it's this part of you can't say it's the cab and the left side of the I don't know what that means. It's too non-specific. So what I did was, I figured out that the teacher had a copy of the actual test, meaning this is the form that is used. So it has exactly what is tested for on Form A, exactly what's tested for on Form B, and exactly what's tested for on Form C. And so I figured all of that out, right? And then I did it in a way where the teacher didn't understand that I was sort of just schmoozing him to get that form out of him. And then I disseminated that to my classmates. Well, this one guy from Africa, a black fellow from Africa, he didn't understand that I had gotten this material and I wasn't supposed to have it. So at a certain point, he just starts going off about, well, why isn't this made clear? And this is bullshit. And so now it's kind of now the instructor's sort of in trouble, because the instructor realizes, well, wait a minute, I never should have even given Benton this information. Well, Benton's trying to help his classmates, and I didn't have any way of predicting that this bozo would do this. So we're all kind of in trouble to some extent. A little egg on the face, but so I saw people who didn't. So that prevented some of the people they weren't able to be clued in. So I saw people fail the pre-trip simply because they couldn't understand which part of the big rig to do the pre-trip on. Right. And I would have also failed it, except I, through my own strategic and my own ability to find the weak points in any system, I figured it out. Right. So I, in fact, passed the pre-trip first time, no problem. And almost everybody failed the fucking pre-trip. And most of them failed. And we spent the most time learning how to pass the pre-trip. That was more than anything else in the class, was figuring out how to pass the pre-trip. Because you got to know all these parts. You got to explain what the part is, what you're checking for, why you need to check it. It's the whole thing, right? And meanwhile, when we talk about these foreigners coming here and getting CDLs, and I have no beef with foreign drivers, they don't go through that process. They're just issued a CDL, and they never have to demonstrate their ability to do a pre-trip, because remember, they don't have the mastery of the language to even be able to be micromanaged at that level. And if I go back to truck driving in about a week, I'll be most likely micromanaged again. But the driver who can barely speak the language, can't read it, and just came to the country for the first time, they can't be micromanaged. it'll be left to me to be micromanaged so that the company can get lower interest rates. I'm sorry, insurance rates. But so, and I forget how I got off on this, but something in what Theo's talking about reminded me of that. And it shows you how the system itself is designed in many ways to thwart our efforts, right? And then to also, so that we'll just quit. And I had already set my mind that no matter what happens, I will not quit. I will not give up. I will not be defeated. And again, that is the spirit of what I am. Like, what I am can't be defeated. But even then, it's the overcoming of these obstacles, right? Just to be able to enter into a nightmare of an industry that, best case scenario, the conditions are quite poor. But anyway, back to Theo.
And that was a bad choice. I don't know if I probably made the choice for sure. I don't remember. But so I had to ask for help. I was like having to ask off stage because I wanted to get everything in sequence.
It's him having to seek. It's him having to seek this help. That's what reminded me of that. Because he wasn't able to foresee his own potential need for the help. I know myself so well that I know that I'm going to go to Starbucks every morning because I'm fucking retarded, and I'm going to study the pre-trip because I knew that I had to study the fuck out of it or I was going to fail. Even though I'm actually ahead of the curve with understanding the mechanics of how a big rig operates. It's because to pass the test is to perform what the government tells me to perform, not common sense. And this is where common sense and word of mouth and conventional wisdom fails, because people would be like, well, what's that matter? If you know what the pieces are and you know what the function of all the components are and you understand the safety, what's it matter? Well, what matters is they're not going to give me a motherfucking CDL, Jack. That's what matters. What the hell are you talking about? What the fuck does it matter? Well, it shouldn't. Yeah, it shouldn't matter. That's common sense. It does matter. They shouldn't be giving CDLs to people who don't even go through this process, but they do. Do you want me to? Now I got to reconcile and explain that? What the fuck? And that's what Theo Vaughn is doing to himself here and doesn't know that's what he's doing. He should have been able to figure this out because he should know himself well enough, but he doesn't.
Anyway, sorry, I know this is getting long, but and then we did the second show, and the second show started out fire. First 22 minutes, we're cooking, and then I couldn't remember stuff. And we didn't put a teleprompter. We've done it for other specials. We didn't do it, and that was a bad choice. I don't know if I probably made the choice for sure. I don't remember, but so I had to ask for help. I was like having to ask off stage because I wanted to get everything in sequence.
Well, and back to what the commenter said about the ghostwriting or whatever, when he talks about it was fire and they were cooking, he doesn't mean that the audience was engaged and loving it. What he means is they film like 5 different performances and then Netflix edits that all together into one special. What he means is that he was relatively sure that the cameras were capturing what was yet to be captured from the previous 4 performances. See, that's what he means. And so the part where he's having to go backstage and get his lines, and he's also needing instruction on where am I supposed to be on the stage, where am I supposed to be looking, what level of audience am I supposed to be engaging with, right, with my facial expressions, knowing that they're going to edit in the gigantic laugh he might have gotten 3 performances ago. See, it's going to be the audio where he probably went out and just killed the whole first show. And that's going to be most of the audio. And now it's all about hitting his marks, and then maybe the camera missed some of the things, maybe the lighting wasn't great. So he's been given specific instructions on how to perform as an entertainer. It's not about who ghost wrote his material, commenter. It's not about is he killing, or is he. The reason why he's going backstage is because it doesn't fucking matter. All that matters, it doesn't matter that the audience is engaged or not engaged. At this point, he just needs whatever the production needs him to deliver. So he's all up in his head, see, because he's not giving them what he wants, what they need.
And I think I got stuck on this sequence thing, and it was just hard, man. It just I didn't feel like myself. I felt like I was trying to kind of pretend to be myself, and it wasn't insane or extreme. It's
an out of body experience, brother.
And we got to the end of the show, and
it's an out of body. It's an OBE
with the producers and the director, my friend Kevin, and just like, did we get it? Did we get it?
No, you didn't.
Excuse me. Did we get it good enough? Because
no.
I want this special to be, you do the material for so long, And my buddy Neil Brennan said this the other day before.
But see, he's already. Why isn't he saying we do 5 of these? See, he's acting like it's a one. It's not a one-off. They do like 5 of them and they edit it together. So he's not even telling the whole truth here.
And I had a lot of people that said it was great though. Like I had people say, "Dude, we loved it. It was great."
Yeah, because that's LA culture. They're never gonna not say that. That's all they're ever gonna say, buddy. Ever. To your face. Don't you know that, Theo? And see, Theo doesn't understand that he's going through an existential crisis that in part is due to he has an inferiority complex that he's never resolved. See, I've resolved my Southern inferiority complex. He hasn't. Because the fact is, Southern California culture and the culture of the entertainment industry will never fully accept him solely based on how he talks. And because of the region of the country Theo is from, he can never completely unwash that accent. It's not possible. Some people can grow up in the South and they can go through speech. Remember, he's had fucking media training. He's had acting training. He's had speech training and vocal coaching, right? His default speech is not that bad, right? But he will never be able to speak with a neutral accent. It's me either. And I'm saying this all from Los Angeles. So part of this culture is that in the entertainment industry, he works with people who always, their knowing is that Theo is less than, and they are waiting for him to fail to confirm what they already know is that he's not a whole, complete being in the way that they are whole, complete beings at the level of status quo, social contract, conformity to peer groups, right? In order to serve the vacuous, delusory, adversarial realm of business transactions. He's never able to be fully sanctified through these dynamics. And everybody knows it. And they're just waiting for him to fall on his face. Not because they want to see him fall on his face necessarily. It's to be able to, because at some point, remember, what is involved with him having a gigantic social media following? What's involved with him being a gigantic crusher of a stand-up comedian, which people have forgotten that for years he went on stage and fucking killed it as a stand-up comedian. Yes, he did. Yes, he did. Whether people want to misremember that or not, that really happened. Okay. And was viewed as very talented and engaging, charming, whimsical. But in a, this is sort of our, almost like this is our retarded cousin who can do these parlor tricks, right? For real, like for real. But then within social contract, status quo, peer groups is the social contract is if he performs the things that at a level of social contract means you get a certain number of subscribers, you get a certain amount of fame, and you get a certain amount of money. And they give that to anybody who performs within that space. See, as long as Theo's willing to do things like, well, when Biden was president, do you think Theo said the word illegal openly? Hell no. He probably said it during the first Trump administration, and he probably said it during the second Trump administration. When did they record him talking about whatever he said on that millions of view video that ended up in the Department of Homeland Security, trap beat remix short? Under what did he say that under cancel culture, or did he wait for it to be safe and he said it? See, because remember, he fully went into the LAB system, which will never fully accept him solely based on how he talks. And I know this because I'm here talking that way, but even worse. So when I go launch into some diatribe in the streets of Los Angeles, like I did yesterday, explaining concepts to people that they should be able to conceptualize, but they can't because of why? Why can't they critically think through these concepts? Because status quo, social contract, and conformity to peer groups won't allow it, because to freely think in those contexts, they will no longer fit in, and they will now be viewed as weirdos, and they will be cast out. And people can't deal with that level of disorientation, discomfort, and fear. And that's fear, guilt, shame, ridicule, mockery. Except in LA, it's not to your face ridicule and mockery, right? It's a indirect, passive aggressive, dressed up in flowery language and pretending to give a fuck about you as an individual. And Theo Vaughn, coming from a simple culture, probably has never matured enough to understand, hey, bozo, these people never cared about you. In fact, they can't care about you because they don't have what, in order to succeed in entertainment, they had to divorce themselves long ago from whatever is within them to give a flying fuck about you as a person. But they're going to behave, Theo. They're going to performatively do everything to make it seem like they care about you because that's what benefits them. And that is this realm. Like it or not, that's what this place is. So Theo has an unresolved existential crisis. Well, he's undergoing an existential crisis that connects to his own unresolved inferiority complex that he's not even aware of. See? Because within the context of the South, that doesn't exist for him. It's only when he removes himself from that cultural context and goes into another country. And now he's going to the worst possible cultural context, Southern California. Which they say, what do you mean? Well, he got famous within that cultural context. Benton is now doing public speaking at times and is interfacing with people. When I go to the store later, some of those people see me, performing in the streets, right? And I know what they think of me as a result. But I have already resolved whatever potential inferiority complex could exist. See? And I'm aware of it. Theo's not. He's not even aware of it, much less has done anything to resolve it.
But I didn't think it was perfect, for sure. But I thought let's just look at the edit and see. And so we still haven't decided. We might shoot again at some point. I don't know what's going to go on.
Well, and see, this is LA. This is LA speak for they can't use it, and we're going to reshoot it. Right. But he's not free to just say it that way. But in Southern culture, you're just like, you just say it how it is. You're just like, yeah, I done fucked up. And, as much as people are able to own their own mistakes, you got to be able to decode what he's saying within the cultural context.
But there was just this energy now where it was like everybody started checking on me, and I was like, "Oh man, this is tough." And there's people that would think like, "Oh well, he failed," or who want to write up something that says he failed, or make a meme. I saw one thing.
And nobody's checking on me. You know why, Theo? Because I don't have money or power. Well, I do. What I am is never lacking power. The point is, Benton is viewed as having no money and no power and no status. There's no reason to check in on old Benton. Hey, we saw you hooping and hollering in the streets yesterday. What's wrong with you? Are you okay? Can we help? They're checking in on you, Theo, because of your very gigantic platform, your influence in the industry, and your fame, sir. And the fact that it's such a big deal to go on your podcast as a guest that Trump and the White and his, all of this chose to go on your podcast. That's why they're checking in with you, sir. It's not because they give a fuck about you, because they can't. They don't have the capacity. And the fact that you don't know, that's not a problem. Krishnamurti would say that's not a problem. The problem is you don't know that, sir. And what's wrong with you at the age of 45? You haven't unfucked yourself enough to figure this out. And here's Benton as death coach. Not that Theo Vaughn would ever seek me out as a death coach. My point is, I absolutely could help the man. Could, but won't be able to. The realm won't allow it. It's just how things work here.
Bombs, Netflix, or whatever, taping or whatever. Awesome. Thank you, dude. But homie, I was fucking in that bitch, cuz.
And see,
See,
here's the proof of the existential crisis via the inferiority complex. In order to, and this is some version of self-soothing, he goes into his native tongue, but you can hear he's actually doing it in a performative way that would work on a podcast. But he's actually going into some bastardized version of his own native tongue. And this is what I mean when I say I'm half black culturally. But listen to what he does here. And you can hear that he doesn't even believe in what he's saying energetically. But he, as a Southerner, he can fall into this way of speaking effortlessly at any time. So listen to what he does here. This is a very, very bad sign that he's choosing to do this right now. And those of you not from the Deep South have no way of relating to this, I can assure you.
Who want to write up something that says
but this is bad. This is very bad for him.
Bombs Netflix or whatever taping or whatever. Awesome. Thank you, dude. But homie, I was fucking in that bitch, cuz. You should have seen me, dog. You should have seen me. You know, you ever see that show, dog? And a lot of times you'll see that dog show. And it's that Weestaminster. I think it's Weestaminster. The Weestaminster dog show. You see that bitch, boy? And they got some dogs in that bitch. And then they got that other, bro. They got that other little
I mean, this is vocal coached LA douchebag who is also you know, was as a young person socialized as a coon ass. And that's what they call themselves down there. This is coon ass who he's been sanctified and blessed into the Southern California entertainment industry. And now he's fallen so low within himself that he's soothing himself and reminding, and he describes bombing, and then in the shame and the fear and the guilt of that, he can't even plausibly go back into his native tongue fully. But this is very bad. This is very, very bad. This is a man in a very, very dark place.
See me. You know, you ever see that show, dog? And a lot of times you'll see that dog show. And it's that Weestaminster. I think it's Weestaminster.
Westminster, sir.
You see that bitch, boy? And they got some dogs in that bitch. And then they got that other, bro. They got that other little taking some time off. I just want to do things that are fun for me. I want to spend time around my friends and stuff like that. And then at the same time, I got to get a little bit of space. Sometimes I spend so much time like on my phone, these things like just texting, so many things that are just kind of like, I just want to be able to have a little bit of peace for myself. And I deserve it, right? And I deserve it.
Cope.
I deserve it.
No, you don't. No, you don't. You don't deserve it because you're serving Satan, and you're not you, the listener, because Theo's doesn't deserve it. He deserves death. Theo, you're serving death, sir. You're a lover of death in this context. Right? He could uncover the perfected path within, but he doesn't get to keep all of his attainments in this world. He doesn't get to keep the audience. He doesn't get to keep, the influence. He doesn't get to keep, everybody's going to treat him like he's the greatest thing since sliced bread. He doesn't get to keep all of that. Right? You're going to have to pick one, buddy. You can't have both. Man cannot serve two masters, lest we forget. Anyway, I got to do a thing, but we're still here. I got some more things I want to cover. Might run a little long on this one. This is about the time I normally would go, but I think we're going to stick around a little longer, perhaps. Who knows? But bear with me. I'm going to mute the mic for about 30 seconds. And actually, that probably wasn't even coon ass. That was more really northeastern Louisiana. And where I'm from is southeastern Arkansas. It ain't that far away from northeastern Louisiana. And it's just that in northeastern Louisiana, you're going to have more of the New Orleans influence versus southeast Arkansas is going to have more of the Memphis influence. But two, black cities, southern black cities, deep south, Mississippi River Delta southern cities. So I'm able to relate to this in a way that most are not. But yeah, very bad sign lapsing into that, and then not even really being able. Very phony version, right? Ah, let me try to remember what else I wanted to cover. There was, oh yeah, this article about college football and managing the mommy's emotions of the players. And these players, sadly, the modern youth have sadly internalized mommy's emotions in a way that when and where I grew up was never a requirement, or rarely, I should say. Pops wouldn't have allowed it. Mom definitely would have known not to do it in the first place. Other than just her having freakouts, mostly around driving long distance road trips. That's really the only time I remember just not being able to get the fuck away from her anxiety. Because otherwise, around the house, there's never any reason for me to be subjected to her, whatever her emotional state was. It's like, yeah, because I would just go outside, right? But let me find this article. It's about former Arkansas head football coach Bobby Petrino, who's now that Arkansas fired their past coach during the season, Sam Pittman. So Petrino is now the interim coach, and he's never made a secret that Arkansas, he loved it there, he wanted to stay there. And yes, this is a very dishonest man who will say whatever's in his best interest, but I'm almost certain that he really did love it there, and that's where he wanted to coach. And he fit in with the culture quite well, except where the part where he didn't understand that. And I won't go into the whole backstory of why he got fired, but it did not have anything to do with his actual performance on the field, if that makes sense. What's happening, partner? Bobby Petrino's message to Arkansas football players includes morning motivation. Bobby Petrino's message to Arkansas football players includes morning, motivation. Fayetteville, there were some hurt feelings inside the Arkansas football locker room earlier this week. Interim coach Bobby Petrino addressed the program's mass overhaul during a team meeting on Monday, September the 29th. He told reporters on this week's SEC teleconference that the Razorbacks, quote, got a lot on the table as they processed the recent firings of Sam Pittman, defensive coordinator Travis Williams, and 2 defensive assistants. According to Petrino, the team came out on the other side motivated and put forth an excellent practice on Tuesday, September the 30th. We went out yesterday and I felt like we had a good practice, Petrino said. There was great attitude out there. Guys were going full speed. We've still got a lot of things to work on, a lot of things to get better at, but the effort and attitude was there, and I was encouraged by what I saw. Petrino acknowledged during his introductory press conference that defensive players would be emotional following Williams' departure. The defensive coordinator was beloved by his players, and a few hogs took to social media in the immediate aftermath to express their displeasure. Petrino didn't want to shy away from the emotions. This means mommy's emotions, not the emotions of the players. Because remember, these players are most likely still involved with mommy's emotions. See, these are not grown men yet. In fact, it's Bobby Petrino's job, if he becomes the head coach for the second time, to turn them into men, right? Because they're not showing up as grown men. It's for him to be their daddy and help them become men through college football. And so Petrino knows that now it's a new era of college football player, and that he has no choice if he's going to be successful. And he's the type of person, he sets his mind to something, he accomplishes it no matter what he has to do. It doesn't matter what it is. This man gritted his teeth and was interviewed about failing in his marriage and having an affair, right? And publicly apologized through gritted teeth. And he's from Butte, Montana, where Evil Knievel is from. And Evil Knievel made no bones about his womanizing, right? And that is the spirit of Bobby Petrino to some extent. Except imagine in order for Evil Knievel to get the permit to do the Snake River Canyon jump, he's got to grit his teeth and confess, you know, double down on his so-called Christian faith, and, you know, going back to his wife that he's clearly not attracted to anymore, and, you know, serve as the head of his household, right? Even though he doesn't want to. But what he wants is to be successful as a football coach, and he's been very successful as a football coach at times. My favorite Arkansas coach of all time in football, without a doubt, because he fits like a glove, and I want him back. And if the man's got to service mommy's emotions, he's going to service mommy's emotions. That's what he's going to do. Period. End of story. So this is why is there all this mourning and emotional talk? Do you think Bobby Petrino wants to service the boys that he's helping turn into men? Do you think anybody serviced his emotions? Do you think anybody serviced Evil Knievel's emotions in Butte, Montana? Hell no. That's why Petrino fits in. He fits in with people my age and older who don't play that shit. But in order for Petrino to be able to get the players to the university, he's got to service mommy's emotions. And he will do whatever it takes. Even if he does it through gritted teeth, he will do this. Right? Petrino did not want to shy away from the emotions. The interim coach said he was also dealing with difficult feelings in the wakes of Pittman's firing. Bullshit. Pittman took a risk bringing Petrino back to Arkansas after more than a decade of exile. Petrino said he is thankful for Pittman's trust and the friendship they built along the way. Bobby Petrino don't give a fuck about any of that except as it impacts his career. He don't give a flying fuck about any of that. And would not be stating it, except now he understands this new environment of mommy's emotions. And when mommy talks to her little Johnny, her little apple of her eye, this is going to be her concern, is the emotions as performed by the coaches. What level of performative emotionalism are the coaching staff doing? And this article I tried to read the other day, what it's all about is that men not engaging in this new touchy-feely level of employment, a lot of that is tied up in them not embracing this new environment where in order to be successful, they are going to have no choice but to perform all of this emotional labor, whether they like it or not. Now, Petrino, you know, is just some level of, I don't want to say psychopath, but narcissistic enough to be able to, and he's intelligent enough to understand the emotional side enough to know what's expected of him to perform. See? And that's what he's going to do, period, end of story. And this is why they're probably going to hire him if he can win a couple of games. And I'm here to tell you, they're going to beat Texas, and he's going to be the head coach. All he's got to do is beat Texas in a few weeks, and he's going to be the head coach. And the talent's already there, and they're going to beat Texas. And he's an offensive genius, and they got this Arch Manning bozo who's not going to be able to score. He's not going to be able to outscore Bobby Petrino offense, and they're going to beat Texas, and he's going to be the coach. That's what's going to happen. It's not because I give a fuck. I don't even really follow it anymore, but I'm here to tell you that's what's going to happen. I tried to let them understand. See, now he's providing them a safe space for their emotions. College football players in the SEC, folks. College football players in the SEC. I tried to let them understand that everybody in the room is feeling some of the things that have hurt and don't feel right, Petrino said. Make sure you mourn properly. Make sure you do something positive for somebody and then get back to what was important to you before. This is all mommy, 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 mommy. In order to get back to the importance of winning games, Petrino is tapping into a unique form of motivation. He's telling his players and his coaching staff the next 9 weeks are essentially money-making time. Because remember, now they can pay the players. And also they have a transfer portal, so they can leave if they want to. Whether it's through the NFL draft, in the transfer portal, or another coaching job, and I think that might be miswritten. The 2025 Razorbacks, I think they mean whatever they mean. I don't know what they're talking about. The 2025 Razorbacks can set themselves up for a better 2026 with a strong close to the season, meaning, hey, even if, basically Petrino's saying, I know some of y'all not finna be here next year. That's okay. All I need y'all to help me do is win enough of these games so that I get what I want, and then simultaneously you will get what you want. And whether that or not that's here next year, it doesn't matter, because I'm going to be servicing mommy's feelings, and I'm going to be able to recruit through the portal. And then if I beat Texas, then the big Arkansas money is going to come in, which, guess what? There is big Arkansas money into the Razorback program. It's called Jerry Jones, the billionaire owner of the Dallas Cowboys, who was on the 1964 Arkansas championship team. And do you think he's given his big money to what's been going on? No, he hasn't. He's going to come back. See, this is all a business. Now we're back to business. See, the vacuous, delusory, adversarial realm of business transactions. Right? The vacuous, delusory, adversarial realm of business transactions. If Bobby Petrino has to transact via mommy's emotions, that's exactly what he's going to do. And then if he has a couple of winning seasons, they're going to give him a gigantic contract with a gigantic buyout, and they're going to have, he's going to be a general manager, meaning they're going to give him, hey, here's your $50 million a year or whatever it is to spend on players. And then he's going to use his superior football mind to bring in the talent, and he's going to win. That's what's going to happen. And if he's got to manage mommy's emotions to do it, he's going to do it. And he'll step on whoever he's got to step on. And everybody's going to hate his guts while he does it. And that's completely fine. Just like people hated Evel Knievel's guts. Doesn't matter. Who cares? Just win, baby. And that's Al Davis, but yeah. And Evel Knievel had no problem breaking his bones repeatedly. And if Bobby Petrino's version is gritting his teeth and managing mommy's emotions, and that's his version of broken bones, so be it. Yeah. Monday was for mourning. Now it's time for the Hogs to get back to work. A road trip to face number 15 Tennessee is on the horizon. Well, he doesn't have to win that, but if he does win it, you know, again, mommy's emotions. And you know, this is where the boomers and Gen X don't really know what the fuck is happening in society. You know. You got old Benton here to help you figure it out, though. Bye.